I never thought I'd be packing up my desk at Wilson & Sons, our family's consulting firm, with my brother Marcus standing over me like a triumphant dictator. His expensive suit and perfectly styled hair seemed to mock me as he watched me empty my drawers with barely concealed satisfaction. "Make sure you don't take anything that belongs to the company," he sneered, adjusting his Rolex, a gift from our father last Christmas. "Though I doubt you've contributed anything worth keeping." I carefully placed my family photo face down in the cardboard box. The image of happier times, before Dad's passing, before Marcus took control, felt like it belonged to someone else's life now. "You know, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady as I unplugged my laptop, "someday you might regret this." He laughed, the sound echoing through the now quiet office. Most employees had gone home, but a few lingered, pretending not to watch the owner's children in their final confrontation. "Regret what, Sarah? Finally getting rid of the dead weight? You've been holding this company back with your innovative ideas and modern approaches. This is a traditional consulting firm, not some Silicon Valley startup." I thought about the confidential documents sitting in my home office, the contracts that would make Marcus's head spin. But now wasn't the time. Everything had to play out perfectly. "Traditional doesn't mean obsolete," I replied, placing my awards in the box. Awards that, ironically, had brought more revenue to Wilson & Sons than Marcus's entire department. "Just leave, Sarah. You're embarrassing yourself." Marcus straightened his tie, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "I'm doing what Dad should have done years ago." My hand froze over the box. What's that supposed to mean? "Oh, come on, we both know he only kept you around out of guilt. The weaker child, the one who needed extra help." His smile turned cruel. "But I'm running things now, and I don't need dead weight." I stood up straight, looking him in the eye. At 32, Marcus was only 2 years older than me, but he carried himself like he was ancient royalty, entitled to everything simply because he was born first and male. "You really believe that, don't you?" I asked quietly. "That Dad favored you because you were better?" "He favored me because I understand business, real business, not your fairy tale ideas about corporate responsibility and sustainable growth." He waved his hand dismissively. "Look at you, in your off-the-rack suit, driving that basic car. When was the last time you closed a major client?" If he only knew about the meetings I had scheduled for tomorrow, about the contracts sitting on my desk at home, about who really owned Spectrum Industries, the client he was so proud of landing last month. "You're right, Marcus. When was the last time I brought in a major client?" I picked up my box and headed for the door. "I guess we'll find out soon enough." "What's that supposed to mean?" His voice had a slight edge now, that hint of uncertainty he always got when he couldn't fully read a situation. Before I could answer, heels clicked on the marble floor of the hallway. Angela Chen, CFO of our biggest potential client, Global Dynamic Solutions, appeared in the doorway. Her sharp business suit and commanding presence immediately filled the room. "Sarah, there's my favorite CEO," she exclaimed warmly, then stopped short, taking in the scene before her. Me with my box of belongings, Marcus's thunderstruck expression. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face had gone from smug to confused to horrified in the span of seconds. I could almost see the wheels turning in his head, trying to make sense of what he just heard. "CEO," he stammered, looking between Angela and me. "There must be some mistake. Sarah's just a junior consultant here." Angela's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. "Oh, that's not what my records show about the owner of Phoenix Industries." She turned to me, her expression professional but her eyes twinkling. "Sarah, I thought we were meeting tomorrow to discuss the acquisition." Marcus grabbed the edge of my old desk for support. Phoenix Industries, the parent company of Global Dynamic Solutions, Spectrum Industries, and half a dozen other major corporations, was known for its mysterious CEO who never appeared in public. "That's right," I said calmly, enjoying the way Marcus's face had lost all color. "But since I'm no longer employee here, perhaps we should move the meeting up. After all," I smiled at my brother, "I wouldn't want to waste anyone's time with my fairy tale ideas about business." Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The Rolex on his wrist suddenly looked cheap, his expensive suit ill-fitting. In one moment, his entire world had shifted on its axis. You're the owner of Phoenix Industries," he whispered, but that's impossible. "They're worth billions." "Nothing's impossible, brother. You just need the right innovative ideas and modern approaches. I turned to Angela. Shall we discuss the terms of acquiring Wilson and Sons over coffee? I know a great place down the street. As we walked out, leaving Marcus frozen in place, I couldn't help but think about how long I'd waited for this moment. 10 years of building my empire in secret, watching Marcus run our father's company into the ground with his outdated methods and bloated ego. Tomorrow, everything would change. But for now, I savored the look on my brother's face as he realized that the sister he just fired wasn't just an employee. I was about to become his boss. The next morning, I sat in my real office, the penthouse suite of the Phoenix Industries building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the city, including the modest Wilson and Sons building 8 blocks away. My father's company looked small from up here, just like Marcus's ambitions. My assistant Michael knocked softly before entering. The Wilson and Sons board members are all here. They're waiting in the main conference room. He paused, a slight smile playing on his lips. Your brother arrived 20 minutes early. He's been pacing the hallway since. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. How does he look? Like he hasn't slept. The Armani suit can't hide the dark circles under his eyes. I nodded, checking my reflection in the window. Unlike Marcus, I'd slept perfectly well. Let's not keep them waiting. The main conference room fell silent as I entered. 8 board members from Wilson and Sons sat around the massive oak table, their expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to careful neutrality. Marcus sat at the far end. His usual commanding presence diminished. His hair, typically perfectly styled, looked hastily combed, and his designer tie was slightly crooked. Good morning, everyone, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. I believe you all received the acquisition proposal last night. Marcus cleared his throat. Sarah, we need to talk about this. Privately, as family. I raised an eyebrow. Family? Yesterday you couldn't wait to throw me out of it. I turned to the board members. Let me be clear about the situation. Wilson and Sons is currently facing a critical decision. Your company's market share has dropped 15% in the last 2 years. Your innovative client base is shrinking. Your technological infrastructure is outdated. One of the board members, Mr. Peterson, spoke up. With all due respect, Ms. Wilson, how do you know so much about our internal affairs? I smiled, sliding a folder across the table. Because I've been watching. Every client you've lost in the past year has signed with one of my subsidiary companies. Every contract Marcus thought slipped through his fingers landed on my desk. Marcus's face flushed red. You've been sabotaging us. No, brother. I've been competing with you. There's a difference. I opened my laptop, projecting a graph onto the screen behind me. This shows Wilson and Sons' revenue decline over the past 5 years. And this, I clicked to the next slide, shows Phoenix Industries' growth during the same period. The contrast was stark. While our father's company had been steadily declining, my empire had grown exponentially. I'm offering to acquire Wilson and Sons for $50 million, I continued. That's generous, considering your current market position. The alternative is watching your company continue its decline until there's nothing left to save. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here and... Sit down, Marcus. Mr. Peterson cut in sharply. Your sister is making a business proposal. Let's hear her out. I could see the moment Marcus realized he was losing control. The board members weren't looking to him for leadership anymore. Their attention was fixed on me. The terms are simple. I continued. Phoenix Industries will absorb Wilson and Sons, modernizing its infrastructure and integrating it into our corporate network. All current employees will keep their positions, with opportunities for advancement in the larger organization. I paused, looking directly at Marcus. All current employees except senior management, that is. You can't fire me, he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. This is my company. Dad left it to me. Dad left it to both of us. I corrected him. But you pushed me out because you couldn't see past your own ego. You thought success meant expensive suits and luxury watches. While you were playing businessman, I was building something real. The board members exchanged glances. They knew I was right. They'd watched Marcus prioritize appearances over substance for years. How did you do it? Marcus asked, his voice hollow. How did you build all this without anyone knowing? I thought back to the day Dad died. when Marcus had immediately assumed control, treating me like an afterthought. When you took over Wilson and Sons, I knew I'd never have a real voice there. So I started small, consulting for struggling tech startups. I helped them grow, took ownership stakes instead of fees. While you were forcing our father's outdated methods, I was learning, adapting, evolving. I clicked to another slide showing Phoenix Industries' current portfolio. Every company here started as someone else's underestimated opportunity. Just like I was your underestimated opportunity, Marcus. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. I moved to vote on the acquisition offer. Second, another board member quickly added. Marcus watched helplessly as hands raised around the table. The vote was unanimous. Wilson and Sons would become part of Phoenix Industries. As the board members filed out, Marcus remained seated, staring at his folded hands. For the first time, I saw him as he really was. Not the confident heir to our father's legacy, but a man who'd been coasting on privilege and assumptions. What happens to me now? He asked quietly. I sat down beside him. That depends on you. Are you ready to learn? Really learn, not just pretend you know everything. He looked up, surprised. You'd still give me a chance. After everything. Your family, Marcus. Real family, not the kind that kicks people out when they don't fit your image. I pulled out a contract from my briefcase. I'm offering you a position in our development division. Entry level. You'll report to people younger than you. It won't be easy, and your fancy suits won't impress anyone. But you'll learn what real business is about. His hands trembled slightly as he took the contract. Why? Why offer me anything? Because 10 years ago, when you pushed me out of Dad's office, told me I'd never amount to anything, you taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. I stood up, straightening my jacket. You taught me that sometimes people's biggest mistake is underestimating those they consider beneath them. I walked to the door, then turned back. The position is available if you want it. But understand this, you'll have to earn every step up from here. No shortcuts, no favoritism. Just hard work and merit. Think you can handle that? Marcus looked down at the contract, then back at me. For the first time since we were kids, I saw genuine humility in his eyes. I can learn, he said softly. Good. I smiled. Because lesson 1 starts tomorrow, don't be late. As I walked back to my office, I thought about how differently things had turned out from what Marcus expected when he'd ordered me to pack up my desk just yesterday. He thought he was getting rid of dead weight, but instead, he'd finally learned the weight of his own actions. My phone buzzed, another notification about a potential acquisition. I smiled, thinking about how success isn't always about who starts at the top. Sometimes it's about who's willing to start at the bottom and build their way up, one underestimated opportunity at a time. In my office, I picked up the family photo I kept face down on my desk for years. Maybe it was time to take a new one that showed both Wilson children as they really were, not as anyone had expected them to be. After all, family businesses are complicated things. Sometimes it takes losing everything you thought you had to find something better than you ever imagined. Marcus was about to learn that lesson just as I had 10 years ago. And this time, we'd both be better for it.
After the death of his beloved wife Ella, Wilmer Castro, the head of a food company, believed he could never find love or happiness again. But as people often say, grief lasts for 3 years. Besides, Anna, Wilmer's mother, often encouraged her son, saying, "Dear, your son needs a mother, and you should keep living. I hope that one day you will find a good woman who will become a good wife for you and a good mother for our little Tao." One day, the young widower met Ingrid, and after a week, he realized she was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Ingrid quickly bonded with his 6-year-old son, Tao, which greatly supported their relationship. A couple of months later, Wilmer proposed to Ingrid, and they had a beautiful wedding. Anna was delighted. "Now I'm not afraid to die," said the elderly mother. "You and Tao are in good hands." "What are you talking about, Mom?" snorted Wilmer. "Stop talking nonsense. Ingrid and I haven't given you a granddaughter yet, and you'll certainly dance at Tao's wedding." After their honeymoon in the Seychelles, the newlyweds began their family life, which Wilmer described as beautiful. Unfortunately, after a while, Wilmer faced a serious problem. Tao started getting sick too often, and his father couldn't understand why. Despite Ingrid's love for the boy and the careful environment she created for him, it didn't help. One illness followed another, a runny nose, a sore throat, or even bronchitis. Why don't we send him to a health camp? Ingrid suggested. But Tao has never been away from home for so long, Wilma thoughtfully replied. Well, you know there's a first time for everything, his wife said. Yes, but not at 6 years old, Wilma objected. It seems a little early for him to be far away from his family alone. I understand your concern, but I disagree. It will be good for Tao. He'll become more independent, and most importantly, he'll get some fresh air and a change of environment. Have you considered that life in the city may not be suited for him? No, I hadn't thought about that, Wilma said, shaking his head. Honey, I'm totally confused. I don't understand anything anymore. Everything was fine with him before, but now he's constantly sick. I try my best to prevent him from viruses, but all in vain, Ingrid said, sobbing and wiping tears from her eyes. I'm watching Tao's diet and regularly airing his room. I don't want to keep him far away from us because I love him, but I can't see his suffering anymore. My heart aches for the poor boy. Wouldn't it make sense to air his room less often? I think it's too chilly in there, Wilma suggested. That's not a problem, replied the young wife. It's worse for him when it's very hot. And fresh air reduces germs. But you know I'm not a doctor, and in the camp, Tao will be under the care of specialists. Well, maybe you're right, Wilma said thoughtfully. Perhaps a health camp is not such a bad idea. Okay, I'll think about it. Thank you, my dear, for all you do for my son. The loving father started exploring various options for children's recreation centers. Soon he found something suitable for Tao and promptly contacted the camp administration. We have an individualized approach for each child, said a woman with a pleasant, well-pitched voice. The minimum length of stay is 2 months. 2 months, Wilma repeated with a slumped voice. Although he didn't fully understand the necessity of this trip, he wasn't ready to be apart from his son for even a whole month. Yes, 2 months, the administrator confirmed. But don't worry, you can visit your child on any day that is convenient for you. Well, that's not so bad, Wilma replied. And how do I sign up? The administrator explained all the necessary details, and that was it. All that was left was to mentally prepare Tao for the trip. After all, the kid was going to be away from home for 2 months. But to Wilma's surprise, Tao's eyes lit up. Will I play there with other kids? The boy asked excitedly, and his father sighed. Yes, he understood pretty well that Tao lacked communication with his peers. He used to go to school, but as soon as a series of colds began, Wilma took his son out. So Ingrid was right. A kids' health camp was a great idea, no matter how you looked at it. However, a week before the departure, the boy complained of a severe headache. Putting his hand on his son's forehead, Wilma shrieked. Tao's forehead was as hot as a stove. The thermometer showed a temperature of almost 40 degrees Celsius. Oh God, this is the last thing we need, the father muttered in despair and sank into a chair. What's wrong? Ingrid asked as she entered, hearing her husband's last words. Tao is sick again, Wilma said, and it seems quite serious. The young woman stared intently at her stepson and furrowed her brow. Tao's face turned red, and sweat started to appear on his forehead. It looks like we'll have to postpone the trip, Wilma said. And now we are going to the doctor. Are you sure? We still have a week before we leave. Maybe he'll get better, Ingrid said. However, the next day, Tao showed no signs of improvement, and the doctor said the trip was no longer an option. I would strongly recommend you get a qualified nurse, the doctor added. I see, thank you. Why do we need a nurse? Ingrid exclaimed as the doctor left. Why do we need a stranger in the house? Do you know anything about medicine? Wilma interrupted her. When it came to his son, Wilma was firm in his principles. Well, no, but... Then this conversation is over, he said. Tonight I will go to the agency's website and find a nurse. Realizing that her husband's decision to hire a nurse for his son was final and could not be challenged, Ingrid did not argue and nodded. Well, that's fine, Wilma concluded. Now I need to go to the office. Take care of Tao. If there's an emergency, call me. After completing some urgent tasks at work, Wilma hurried home. He trusted Ingrid as much as he trusted himself, but he felt calmer if Tayo was by his side. As he drove over the bridge, he noticed a very young, poorly dressed girl. She seemed lost in thought, and then she swung her leg over the railing with the clear intention of jumping. Wilma slammed on the brakes and quickly got out of the car. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted, pulling the stranger away from the railing. "Are you exhausted from living?" "Yes, tired," sobbed the girl. "This isn't life but just suffering." "Come on, let's go to the car," Wilma commanded. After a little hesitation, the girl obeyed. "What's your name?" Wilma tried to ask her kindly. "Corey," replied the girl timidly. "Corey, tell me, why does such a young, beautiful girl think that life is suffering?" "I'm pregnant," Corey whispered and silently sobbed. "Wow, congratulations," the businessman shook his head reproachfully. "So you've decided not only to ruin yourself but also your innocent child?" "My fiancé left me," the girl kept sobbing. "I trusted him, and he did such a cruel thing to me." "I see," Wilma nodded. "But that's still no reason to take your life and the life of your child." "It's easy for you to say," she sighed. "But I have no one to turn to, and I have nowhere to live." "What about your parents?" As it turned out, Corey's father left the family when she was 2 years old. Her mother raised her alone, and when Corey was 14, her mother met Bob. Bob moved into their house in the village and took care of all the repairs that needed to be done. He seemed to be a hard worker in general, and both the mother and daughter were grateful for his help around the house. The idyllic situation lasted for exactly 3 months, and then Bob started to have bouts of drunkenness that would last for months. "Mom, why don't you kick him out?" Corey asked. "Why do you need him?" "You wouldn't understand," the mother sighed. "Even though he's bad, he's mine." And then Mom got sick. The 4th stage left no chance of recovery. The woman burned out like a candle in a matter of months. Bob kept living with his stepdaughter. "I'm registered here, so I'm not going anywhere," declared the stepfather. Corey was not happy to live with Bob, who was basically a stranger to her, but she couldn't do anything about it because Bob was legally registered at their address. After a while, she met Steve. The young couple rented an apartment and began living together. However, the news of Corey's pregnancy did not make her boyfriend happy at all, and the poor girl moved out of the rented apartment. When she returned to her mother's house, she found it had burnt down. Bob said it happened because of old wiring, but Corey was sure it was because of his habit of smoking in bed. "I was desperate because I had nowhere to go and no one to ask for help." "There's always a way out," Wilma spoke slowly. "No, I'm not going to have an abortion," Corey said, shaking her head. "My mother told me never to do this because of my red negative blood type. Otherwise, I might never have a baby again." "I see," Wilma sighed. He was puzzled. Unlike many businessmen, Wilma Castro had not lost his ability to feel compassion for the people around him, and he wanted very much to help the stranger. But how could he help her? "And what can you do?" Wilma asked. "What do you mean?" Corey frowned. "You think if you have money, you can." The girl did not finish her thought and looked indignantly at Wilma. The man looked at her perplexed, and when he finally realized what she meant, he laughed. Wait, Corey," Wilma laughed. "Did you think that I wanted to offer you intimacy?" He looked at her, and the girl blushed. "Okay, I should be more clear. Will you come work for me as a maid?" The man asked. "Do you need a maid?" "Well, you could say that," Wilma nodded. "I do have a maid, but she doesn't suit me very well." "What's wrong with her?" Corey inquired. "What if I'm not right for you for the same reason?" "I hope that's not the case," the man smiled. "My former maid is, shall we say, overstepping her boundaries, but I'd still like to know what skills you have." Corey was silent for about half a minute, then she said, "I did 4 years of medical school, but I quit as soon as I found out I was pregnant, and my boyfriend betrayed me." "Oh," Wilma exclaimed. "Why didn't you take a leave of absence?" "Well, everything came at once. I just couldn't take it." "I see," he said, and then it hit him. "What if I hire this girl as a nurse for Tao?" 4 completed courses or something, Wilma thought, and explaining the situation, he offered Corey a job. "Oh no," she said, afraid. I'm afraid that I can't handle it. Didn't they teach you anything in medical school? Wilmer widened his eyes and added, I can't believe this. Corey kept refusing, but the natural gift of persuasion possessed by the businessman did its job. When the girl finally agreed, she felt both joy and shame. Just a minute ago, she didn't want to live, and now she had found a job and a roof over her head. You never know where you'll find it or where you'll lose it. Ingrid, on the other hand, was furious. She did not take the stranger's appearance in the house easily. Why do you need this homeless woman? Exclaimed Wilmer's perplexed wife. Why the hell did you bring her? She'll only make things worse. What makes you say that? Wilmer asked calmly. Corey has an unfinished medical degree. If she had finished medical school, she would be an excellent therapist. The most important word is unfinished, Ingrid said angrily. Ingrid, do you really think I'd hire Corey if she didn't have any knowledge at all? We had a chat during the ride, and then we visited Tao's doctor. He has instructed Corey and is convinced she is the right person for the job. I don't know, Ingrid threw in irritably. She is just an undergraduate doctor, and she's pregnant. Honestly, I was shocked by your decision. Darling, I know how careful you are about Tao, but trust me, everything will be fine, Wilmer assured her. I don't think so, Ingrid thought but said nothing. Corey gave the impression of a person who knew her job despite not being a qualified doctor. She quickly made the same diagnosis as the visiting doctor. Corey noticed that the child's living quarters were excessively damp. Most likely, his frequent illnesses are due to this, she suggested. Changing the room and belongings should improve the situation without the need to move to the camp. What a smartass, Ingrid thought angrily. She wanted nothing more than to avoid living under the same roof as some ragamuffin. However, Wilmer stood his ground. His intuition told him Corey's presence would bring benefits, and he was right. Tao loved Corey, if not as his own mother, but as a good, kind relative for sure. But as they say, trust but verify. Wilmer decided to reassure himself by installing the camera. First, he needed to confirm Corey's trustworthiness. Secondly, he could monitor his son's well-being during his business trips. While in the office, he periodically reviewed the footage and was satisfied. Corey fulfilled her duties perfectly, and the child was not disappointed in her. The problem was only with Ingrid. Wilmer was no fool and suspected that his wife was unhappy with the young nurse's presence. Ingrid tried to convince him of the nurse's lack of professionalism, and the man felt that something else was behind her attitude. Maybe Ingrid is just jealous, Wilmer thought. When he first saw Corey, he didn't pay much attention to her appearance. However, when she had tidied herself up and worn new clothes bought with his advanced payment, Wilmer noticed that she was quite attractive. Corey had long, light blonde hair, slightly slanted bright blue eyes, soft pink puffy lips, and a natural blush. Ingrid was beautiful as well, of course, but her beauty was the result of the work of a stylist, makeup artist, and hairdresser. People like Ingrid are usually considered stunning but not naturally beautiful. Perhaps that was the issue. I should bring Ingrid a more expensive gift from my business trip, Wilmer thought. She loves that, and then we can travel somewhere to relax. I have to go on a business trip tomorrow, Wilmer announced during dinner. It will be for a couple of weeks. Can you manage without me? Sure, honey, Ingrid nodded. You can be sure that there won't be any unpleasant surprises from my side. With that, she cast an unkind glance at Corey. Wilmer sighed quietly. Here we go again. As he continued to observe his son and the nurse, he became more convinced that this girl was a godsend. Corey spent almost the entire day with Tao, showing genuine interest in his well-being. She regularly measured his body temperature and administered the prescribed medication. In short, she performed her duties to the best of her ability, and as for qualifications, she would definitely get her degree in time. But now, Wilmer could only hope that Ingrid would change her attitude towards Corey. What unpleasant surprises are you talking about? Wilmer smiled. The main thing is that you get along. Dad, Corey, and I already get along well, smiled Tao. Well, that's great, his father concluded. Ingrid continued to eat dinner with a sour expression. It wasn't that she was jealous of the nurse taking care of her stepson, but she feared that this obscure newcomer with supposed medical education might threaten her position. Ingrid saw only one way to get rid of the despised nurse: to frame her. But how? That was the question. Never mind, the young woman thought optimistically. There will be a way eventually. By the way, Ingrid said to Corey as soon as her husband had left for his business trip, from now on, you will eat in the kitchen, okay? The nurse shrugged, but the boy resisted. No, Corey will eat with us. Tio, while your daddy is away, it will be as I say, retorted the stepmother. No, the boy frowned. Ingrid wanted to scold her stepson but hesitated upon remembering the camera. It was one thing to put the staff in their place and quite another to yell at the child. Wilma never forgave anyone for that. Teo, she said in a sugary voice, it's necessary. Corey will eat in the kitchen. After all, the gardener and the guard eat in the kitchen, and there's nothing wrong with that. No, the child said, standing his ground. And you are bad. Teo, there is no need to argue, said the nurse, sitting down on the kitchen chair. I'll eat in the kitchen, and then, as usual, I'll come to you. It's really no big deal. All right, the boy nodded after a little thought. After breakfast, Corey took Teo out for a walk. Meanwhile, Ingrid tried to solve the issue of the suddenly appearing nurse. Think, Ingrid, think, she said mentally to herself. There must be some way of evicting this beggar from here. She went up to her stepson's room, intending once more to air it out. Just then, Ingrid's gaze fell on the camera. Of course, how could I not have thought of that? Ingrid's plan was a piece of cake. She purposely placed her purse in the boy's room so that it would be visible on the camera. Ingrid was sure that Corey would take the purse and return it to her, and then she could convince her husband that his protégé was an ordinary thief. The plan was set. Corey noticed the purse and, assuming it belonged to Ingrid, decided to return it. Is this yours, Ingrid? She said, holding out her find. It's Mrs. Castro, the woman said arrogantly. Mrs. Castro, is this your purse? Corey repeated her question with faint irony. Mine, Ingrid nodded and, opening it, exclaimed, it's empty. Where is my money? I don't know that, Corey said resolutely, guessing what the arrogant woman was hinting at. I found this purse in Teo's room and brought it to you at once. Whether it was empty or had something in it, I didn't look. But I did, and there were $1,000 and credit cards in there. Oh, you've cleaned it out. Yeah, I'm such a fool to take the money and return your empty purse, Corey remarked with a chuckle. She wouldn't allow anyone to humiliate her or accuse her of something she didn't do. How should I know what's in your head? Grumbled Ingrid. I think you went somewhere away from the camera, took everything out, and then pretended you weren't involved. Get out of here. Thieves don't belong in a decent home, and with the money you've stolen, you can count it as your severance pay. But I didn't take any money, retorted Corey, her voice trembling. I don't want to listen to your lies, Ingrid said with her brow raised. If you don't get out of here within 15 minutes, you'll have to explain everything at the police station. Believe me, it'll be more difficult for you. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, the wife of a decent businessman, or some beggar half-doctor? Corey realized it was useless to argue and went to her room to pack her things. Ingrid followed her, watching triumphantly as Corey packed. Everything had gone according to her brilliantly simple plan. The nurse, swallowing her tears, left the room and then the house. She was glad Teo hadn't seen her leaving, but the rest of her life seemed bleak. The little money she had in her wallet was enough only for a couple of nights in the cheapest hostel. Corey was again faced with the problem of what to do next. When Wilma heard from Ingrid about Corey's crime, he was discouraged, to say the least. He didn't want to believe it, and couldn't. He had helped the poor woman as a human being, and she had repaid him like this. It was beyond his understanding and faith in people. After watching the tape, he was convinced that his son's nurse had taken Ingrid's wallet from the table. But did Corey take money from it? That was the question. On the other hand, Wilma had no reason not to trust his wife. Yes, Ingrid disliked the nurse from the first sight, but baseless accusations would be too much, even for the disgruntled Ingrid. Besides, Ingrid loved Tao, wished him well, and couldn't help but notice that Corey's presence in their house was good for him. Yes, the camera couldn't confirm the exact theft, but the fact that Corey had the purse in her hands was undeniable. You know, when a person is tight on money, they may go for a lot more than that, Ingrid said. How do you know what kind of trouble she's really in? Maybe she owed someone money. What do you know about her besides? Wilmer knew his wife had a point. No matter how much you feed a wolf, it's still looking at the woods, he thought, reluctantly admitting the possibility that Corey did steal the money. After her conversation with Wilmer, Ingrid drank white wine with exotic fruits, gloating over her victory. You've lived in a decent house and slept on clean sheets. It's time to return to your usual good-for-nothing life, she thought viciously. Where's Corey? Tao asked when his stepmother entered his room in the evening. Corey doesn't work for us anymore, Ingrid shrugged and opened the window. Why? The child asked plaintively. Because your darling Corey has stolen my money, Ingrid said eagerly. You're lying. Corey's good. You're bad, Tao retorted. If you don't want to believe it, I don't care, Ingrid said, grinning. Close the window, please. I'm cold, Tao asked. All right, Ingrid replied after a little hesitation, and she closed the window. The next day, the boy felt sick again. I feel bad, Tao complained. Well, what's the matter with you now? Ingrid rolled her eyes. The boy was flushed, and his eyes shone with an unhealthy glow. Give me the syrup, Tao asked quietly. What kind of syrup? Ingrid exclaimed. You don't even know what kind of syrup. The boy cried in despair. Why did you kick Corey out? I've already explained to you that she's a thief, Ingrid said sternly. Not another word about her. Do you understand? Tao was smart beyond his years and guessed he wouldn't get what he wanted. It's better to wait for Daddy, he thought. Ingrid gave him the syrup and left the room. She wanted to open the window, but the boy said he was very cold, so she didn't do it. Tao began to wither. It wasn't just the illness, he felt that only Corey really cared for him. His daddy, of course, loved him very much, but worked a lot and couldn't spend enough time with him. Ingrid didn't care about him. All she cared about was herself and Wilmer's money. As for Corey, after such a dishonorable discharge, she had fallen on hard times. After spending 2 nights in a hostel, she went in search of some kind of accommodation. She hoped the world wouldn't be devoid of kind people. What if someone will take me in for a loan? Corey thought hopefully, or offer to help them with household chores in exchange for a roof over my head. However, her hopes were fading by the minute. No one was willing to lend her a corner. Still, Corey tried not to despair. What else could she do? She decided to visit the neighborhood where she and Steve had rented an apartment. People often rented out apartments there for very low prices because it was a high-crime district. Miraculously, she got lucky, though it could hardly be called real luck. The man who agreed to lend Corey the tiny apartment lived in the next one, and he was a heavy drunkard. The apartment was filthy and smelled of stale cigarette smoke, but it was better than living on the street. I expect the money in a month, said the drunk landlord. Deal, Corey nodded heartily, hoping to find some work. The main thing was not to inform potential employers about her pregnancy. During her job search, her landlord would visit her home from time to time and ask about money. But it hasn't been a month yet, has it? Corey invariably answered, suspecting the man needed money for booze, and the sooner the better. Finally, Corey managed to get a job at a food delivery service. We pay weekly, the administrator informed her. Corey nodded happily. She couldn't have dreamed of such luck. The pay was good, and by her calculations, she should be able to pay the rent on time. After working for a week, Corey filled the fridge and put aside money for the rent. But unfortunately, that was the end of her bright streak. One day she got sick at work. Corey was leaving the shopping center loaded with products to deliver and fainted. The frightened administrator called an ambulance. In your condition, it's not normal to carry such heavy weights, said the doctor. You're at risk of miscarriage, so you'll have to stay here for a couple of days. Corey sighed heavily. She had only worked 2 days this week and wondered if she would be paid for her work. No work again, no money. Corey thought sadly. How will I pay the rent? The only positive thing was that the hospital was much more comfortable than the shabby apartment. She called the landlord and asked him to wait an extra week, mentioning she had gotten to the hospital. Of course, he was already being overly kind to her, but she was hoping for his extra favor. However, this time the man didn't want to get into the poor woman's problems. "I don't care. Do you have any money at all?" he interrupted Corey's stream of complaints. "Yes, in the kitchen cupboard under the blue teapot," she replied, hoping that the landlord would be convinced of her solvency and make concessions. What a naive girl she was. "That's good," the man said, visibly pleased, and added, "I'll take all the money. That's 1 month's pay and my moral compensation for the long wait. And you should not come back here again. I don't need such irresponsible tenants here. Where can I get the key?" Corey answered gloomily, "At the city hospital. I'll leave it with the lady on duty." "Why aren't you eating?" Ingrid asked, watching her steps and pick at a plate of pasta with a frown. "I don't want to," Tayo mumbled defiantly, pushing the plate away. The boy longed for Corey very much but realized he shouldn't talk about her with his stepmother, otherwise she would start cursing and calling her a thief again. "How are you?" Wilma cheerfully asked the household upon returning from a business trip. "Fine," purred Ingrid, kissing her husband. "Yeah," he smiled. "That's great. Where's Tayo?" "He's in his room," she replied. Seeing his son, Wilma froze with his mouth open. To be honest, he didn't even immediately recognize Tayo. The boy had turned pale, shriveled up, and looked unfortunate. "Are you sick again?" the worried father asked. "Dad, can Corey come back?" replied the boy, a tear rolling down his pale cheek. Wilma was confused. "Son, I would love for her to come back, but it's impossible," he replied in despair. Wilma looked at his wife as if asking her if Tayo knew about the theft. Ingrid barely nodded. "Daddy, I know that Ingrid thinks Corey stole the money," said the shrewd child, "but that's not true. She's good and Ingrid is bad. I was cold and she opened the window." "What are you talking about, good or bad?" Ingrid couldn't take it anymore. If only it were that simple. "Ingrid, don't yell at the child," Wilma said quietly but firmly. "I'm sorry," she stammered, "but you should understand." "I understand," said the husband. "When I left, Tayo got sick again. Isn't that a reason to listen to his request?" Ingrid couldn't believe her ears. "Are you going to hire her again?" "I'm considering it," the wife replied calmly. "And then I'd still like to hear the other side of this case." Without delay, Wilma began his search for Corey. It didn't seem easy as she had no permanent address. All he had was the address of the apartment she shared with the father of her child, but they had broken up, and it was unlikely she would go back to him after such a betrayal. Though she might have acquaintances there, it's worth a try, Wilma reasoned. There are no other clues yet. The neighborhood looked shabby, and the successful businessman looked like a man from another world on its streets. Wilma showed Corey's picture to the locals, but people just shrugged their shoulders. He was about to leave the place empty-handed. When luck smiled on him, Wilma nodded in gratitude to the woman of about 40 in a flowered dress and washed-out sweater. "Yes, I saw this girl yesterday," she confirmed. "She rented an apartment in that house over there on the first floor." "Thank you very much," Wilma thanked the woman and made his way to the building she had pointed out. At the entrance, he encountered 3 drunken men and asked, "Guys, have any of you rented an apartment to a woman named Corey?" "Let's say it's me," one of them replied, flashing a smile that revealed his few remaining teeth. "Or is it really you?" Wilma inquired. "Yeah, she was my tenant," the man replied, eyeing Wilma with curiosity, clearly hoping for some money. "Whatever you ask, as long as the information is useful," Wilma offered. For $50, he learned that Corey had indeed rented an apartment from the man, but had been asked to leave due to non-payment. "And where could she be now, do you know?" Wilma asked, though not expecting much. "The day before yesterday, she was at the city hospital," the man replied. "She called and tried to get me to wait another week. I said no, I'm not a charity organization." "I see," Wilma nodded again, taking out money from his wallet and walking away. What kind of jerk would you have to be to kick a pregnant woman out of an apartment? He thought indignantly. Although, what else could I expect from a marginal? However, he was more concerned with another point: if Corey had stolen the money, as Ingrid assured him, then how come she had nothing to pay for this rundown place? The answer was clear: Corey hadn't stolen anything, and Ingrid hadn't paid her a penny. Wilma felt deeply embarrassed. Corey had worked for him for almost a whole month, doing her job perfectly, and Tao not only recovered but also grew attached to her. I just have to find her, Wilma thought as he headed to the city hospital, praying that Corey was there. Threatened miscarriage, Corey smiled sadly as she recounted her ordeal to the businessman. His heart sank from nervousness and concern, and I ended up getting sick right at work. That's how I ended up here, she explained. Wilma mentally cursed the situation. This wasn't what he wanted for the woman who had worked diligently for him. If only we had handled things differently at work, he mused, raising his eyebrows in bewilderment. Corey nodded as Wilma began. This very dismissal is what I want to talk to you about. It's a very delicate issue. He paused, unsure of how to proceed. Mr. Castro, I didn't take your wife's purse. Well, I did, but I didn't look inside. I just wanted to give it to her, Corey interjected, desperation evident in her voice. The businessman sensed her sincerity. I believe you, he said quietly. And I want to suggest that we go back. But your wife won't let me work, Corey interrupted uncertainly. I'll take care of my wife, Wilma assured her. Good, then I agree, Corey nodded. Well, now rest and take care of yourself, Wilma smiled. We're looking forward to seeing you. With great effort from the doctors, Corey's pregnancy was saved. Wilma and Tao came together to pick her up upon her discharge. I'm very glad you're coming back, little Tao said seriously, looking at her. Seeing Corey, Ingrid pressed her lips together unhappily but said nothing. Oh, these setbacks, she grumbled mentally. They are rarely tenacious creatures. You close the door, they come in through the window. There was nothing to set Corey up again, Wilma reflected silently. He wouldn't believe it anyway. Tao quickly began to recover, his cheeks rosy and health returning. He loved going for walks with Corey, visiting the zoo, amusement parks, and other places perfect for young visitors. One day, while in the park, Tao and Corey found a puppy, whom they adopted and named Finn. Wilma was pleased, but something still troubled him. Corey, you're like a magician, Wilma commented one day. Tao seems stronger and happier now than ever. What are you doing with him? Miracles. No, Corey replied embarrassedly. No miracles. When Tao was moved to another room, the optimal air temperature and carefully selected medications made a significant difference. Wilma recalled Tao's comment about Ingrid opening the window and wondered if it had contributed to his frequent illnesses. He had often wondered why Tao's room seemed damp, initially blaming construction errors and even considering legal action against the builders. Now, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if Ingrid intentionally cooled Tao's room? She had also insisted on sending Tao to a health camp. Wilma hesitated to accuse his wife outright and decided to order an independent examination. He hoped fervently that he was mistaken, praying he hadn't married a woman capable of endangering their son's health. The strain in their marriage became apparent. One day, Ingrid casually brought up whether it was appropriate for servants to dine at the same table as the hosts. Maybe, Wilma replied calmly, but Corey has become part of our family for Tao and me. She saved my son, for which I'll be grateful for the rest of my life. Ingrid frowned, tears welling in her eyes. Okay, I finally get it. Since you don't need me here anymore, it's time to end this charade, Wilma. I'm filing for divorce, she declared, rushing upstairs to her bedroom. Wilma was taken aback by her sudden proclamation. He knew Ingrid didn't truly intend to divorce him. It was a manipulative tactic. She expected him to chase after her, begging for forgiveness. Her condition would likely be the dismissal of Corey. But Ingrid underestimated Wilma. He willingly signed the divorce papers and even offered her everything she was entitled to. Nothing. Be grateful I didn't accuse you of taking money from the safe, Wilma remarked coolly after the proceedings. And you thought I wouldn't notice anything. Ingrid shot him a hateful look, but it had no effect. Well, my dear, Wilma continued, unfazed, note that it wasn't me who filed for divorce. With that, he handed her the results of the independent examination and bid her goodbye. I wish you happiness in your search for another fool, Ingrid spat angrily as she walked away, her heels clicking loudly. To hell with you. As she stood in her rage, Ingrid's mind raced with thoughts of revenge. You forget worldly wisdom, he laughs best who laughs last. That same evening, armed with a can of gasoline and a lighter, Ingrid headed towards the house where Corey and Theo lived. Inside, Corey and Theo were engrossed in board games, while Finn, their dog, happily roamed about. They were waiting for Wilma, who was due back any minute. It smells burnt, Theo remarked innocently, sniffing the air. Corey, too, caught the scent of smoke. Then horror struck as flames flickered through the window. Corey, I'm scared. Theo cried out in fear. Stay calm, my darling, Corey reassured him, picking him up swiftly. We need to get out now. They dashed towards the exit, knowing they had little time before the fire blocked their escape route. Corey placed Theo safely on the grass outside and took a moment to catch a breath. I've called the fire department, a neighbor shouted, rushing towards them. Is Finn okay? Theo squealed in relief at the sight of Finn. Corey couldn't bear to leave their beloved pet behind. Without hesitation, she plunged back into the blazing inferno. Moments later, a deafening explosion echoed as the house collapsed like a house of cards. Meanwhile, racing down the street, Wilma couldn't believe his eyes. His cherished home, now engulfed in flames, stood as a stark symbol of destruction. He parked hastily. Where's my son? Wilma shouted anxiously, leaping out of the car. He's safe at the neighbor's, a firefighter reassured him. We're trying to contain the fire. Wilma rushed towards the neighbor's house, his heart pounding with fear for Corey and Finn. Corey, he called out desperately. The little one, Theo stammered tearfully, still in shock. And Finn. They took her to the hospital, a firefighter informed him. She's seriously injured. Wilma hurried to the hospital, where he learned Corey was stable. Her hands and feet were burned, but her life and pregnancy were not in danger. Thankfully, Corey had managed to escape through the kitchen's emergency exit just before the house collapsed. Sitting by Corey's bedside, Wilma held her hand gently. She slept under sedation, her face peaceful despite the ordeal. It was then that Wilma realized how deeply he cared for her. I never had the chance to tell you that I love you, Wilma whispered softly, his voice filled with emotion. The house, destroyed by the fire, was beyond repair, but fortunately it was insured. Security cameras had captured Ingrid setting the fire. Due to her declared insanity, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital rather than facing jail time. Corey's condition improved daily, and one day Wilma visited her with Theo by his side. Why did you risk your life like that? Wilma asked quietly. It was Theo's favorite puppy, Corey replied with a smile. And we found him in the park. Besides, we're responsible for those we tame. Then you're responsible for me, Wilma said tenderly, taking her hands in his. After everything, I've realized how dear you've become to me. I won't let you go anywhere else if you'll have me. Corey underwent a rehabilitation program, and in time, they married. On New Year's Eve, she felt the joy of motherhood as they welcomed a baby girl into their family. That new year became the best in Wilma Mastro's life. His family was truly happy, and their love grew stronger, making every hardship worth enduring.
Revenge on my wife for me. Those were the words I read in a letter from my late son, Liam, who had passed away suddenly, leaving behind what once was a happy marriage. Revenge on my wife for me. The words were followed by an address I didn't recognize. Is this where Liam wants me to go? I wondered, my tears now replaced by cold sweats. I never imagined Liam using a word like revenge. He must have been pushed to his limits. What could I possibly find out there? Since the funeral, I had been cooped up at home, but I immediately rushed out, forgetting even to do my makeup. But right now, that didn't matter. I wanted to honor my beloved son's last wish. Driven by a single purpose, I hurried to the address written in Liam's letter. The place he directed me to was a rental storage facility a bit away from my home. Among the rows of storage units, I found the one numbered in the letter. Inserting a small key that was attached to the letter into the lock, I opened the door. The small room, about the size of a half-bedroom, was dimly lit and slightly musty despite it being daytime. When I pressed the switch for the fluorescent light next to the door, the exposed bulb buzzed to life, illuminating the room. "What is this?" I exclaimed, feeling an instinctive fear that made my whole body tremble. "My name is Amelia Williams. I'm a 54-year-old part-time employee. It's been 20 years since I lost my beloved husband." He had mentioned feeling a bit unwell, and not long after he passed away. His death was so sudden and unbelievable that I still find it hard to accept. He wasn't suffering from any serious illness and had always been diligent about his annual health checkups. Yet despite this, he left me and our son Liam behind. After my husband's death, Liam and I lived together. At that time, Liam was just in elementary school and seemed unable to accept his father's sudden passing more than I could. My in-laws also started visiting frequently to take care of Liam. It seemed as if Liam was desperately trying to hide the loneliness of not having his father around. Responding to our grief, he even encouraged me when I would frequently panic. "Mom, it's okay because I'm here." His young voice still echoes in my ears. After losing my husband, I started working part-time to raise Liam, trying to forget the sadness amidst the daily busyness. Liam never complained, even though I was often busy and away from home. He must have felt lonely too, but he never said a word and continued to encourage me. In response to Liam's support, I gradually overcame my sadness. As time passed, in middle and high school, Liam started working part-time, helping with the household finances. He did this to avoid putting too much strain on me, balancing work and his studies. He was a good student, and at parent-teacher meetings, teachers would praise him so much that it almost embarrassed me. Despite losing his father, I am grateful every day for how wonderfully he has grown up. After graduating high school, Liam started working right away. He had the grades to aim for any university, but I think he considered my situation. "I'm tired of studying," he said, and began working at a small local factory. Liam, always smart, learned his job quickly and was well liked at the factory. Despite the challenges of physical labor, his days seemed fulfilling. A few years passed and Liam found a girlfriend. He used to stay in on his days off, but then he started going out almost every weekend. As a mother, I felt a bit lonely, but I was also relieved that my son, at that age, had a girlfriend. Above all, Liam seemed happy, which made me happy. He had always been considerate of me, continually supporting me. Now I wanted him to think about his own happiness. I watched over his relationship from a distance. When Liam turned 27, he decided to get married. His fiancée was a woman 2 years his senior named Chloe. When they got engaged, Chloe came with Liam to meet me. Compared to the rather reserved Liam, Chloe was a striking beauty with distinct facial features. I was surprised not only that Liam brought home such a woman but also that they met at a drinking party. I was taken aback by this unknown side of my son, whom I had doted on, but I had no bad impression of Chloe. She worked in sales at a cosmetics company, I learned. Perhaps because of her job, she was good at conversation, and our first meeting ended in a pleasant atmosphere. Soon after, they had their wedding, and Liam moved out to live apart from me. "Mom, are you sure you'll be okay alone?" "It's still in the county, but a bit far," Liam worried until the very last minute before moving. Chloe also seemed concerned about me living alone, and there was even serious talk of us living together for a while. Though it was a kind offer, I couldn't impose any further on Liam. I graciously declined their kind intentions and celebrated their new life together. Even after that, Liam frequently visited me, but I noticed he was getting thinner. He had chosen to change jobs to be closer to Schlo's company, but it seemed to be quite tough for him. Unlike the small factory he was used to, Liam had chosen a sales job, and apparently, the stress had caused him to lose his appetite. "You've lost weight again, haven't you? It's good to work hard, but it's serious if you ruin your health, you know." I'd express my concern every time Liam visited home, but he would just say, "I'm fine, really," showing no intention of changing jobs initially. I assumed his stress was due to the unfamiliar job, but it took me a while to realize that this wasn't the only thing troubling him. I've told him, but he won't listen. Maybe Chloe could talk to him. He can be so stubborn, I thought. 3 years into Liam and Chloe's marriage, as Liam turned 30, his complexion worsened, and he seemed on the verge of physical exhaustion. I often asked him, why not change jobs instead of overworking yourself? But he stubbornly refused. Perhaps it was his sense of responsibility from being married to Chloe that made Liam feel he couldn't just quit his job now. Seeing this, I contacted Chloe, asking her to encourage Liam to consider a job change. Chloe seemed worried about Liam getting thinner day by day and tearfully apologized to me, saying it was her fault. Chloe, you're not to blame. Liam has always been a hard worker and tends to push himself too hard. But he might listen more readily to you than to me, I said. Honestly, I had been feeling somewhat irritated with Chloe for not doing anything about Liam's deteriorating health since their marriage. Despite my repeated requests for her to take care of him, she did nothing but apologize. Yet I couldn't blame her outright, so all I could do was watch as Liam's health declined. Days passed since I contacted Chloe, but there was no sign of any response from her. She must know how worried I am. Wouldn't it be normal to at least get in touch? Concerned about Liam, I found myself getting irritated over small things. I decided to calm myself and took the initiative to contact her again. Hi, Chloe. Have you talked to Liam since our last conversation? I carefully chose my words as I asked Chloe about Liam's situation. After a moment's pause, an unbelievable response came. Not words, but the distinct sound of a tongue clicking on the other end of the phone. Chloe had definitely clicked her tongue. Mother-in-law, I'm busy with my work too. I'm keeping a close eye on Liam's health. Aren't you being a bit overprotective? If he says he's fine, then he must be fine, Chloe said, her irritation evident as she rushed through her words. It wasn't the tone of voice I knew from Chloe, but it was unmistakably hers. Had she been pretending all this time? I was left speechless, and Chloe seemed to regain some composure, continuing, I'm sorry. I'm just worried and getting irritated too. Chloe tried to cover up her frustration, but my wariness toward her didn't fade. For the first time, I saw Chloe as a potential threat. If things continued this way, Liam might be in danger. A bad feeling crossed my mind, but as long as Liam himself didn't speak up, I couldn't interfere in matters involving Chloe. Liam was due to visit in a few days, and I thought I should speak to him more firmly then. Could he be troubled by something other than work? Perhaps there were serious issues in his marital life. Maybe, as Chloe suggested, I was being a bit overprotective, but it should be okay to talk when he visited. I managed to hide my restless feelings and waited for the day Liam would come, but my judgment proved to be wrong, a decision I would regret for the rest of my life. It happened suddenly. Is this Mrs. Williams, mother of Liam Williams? The call from the police gripped my heart with pain. A dreadful premonition shot through me, and I felt as if I were about to faint. It couldn't be. Even before the officer could state their business, my mind raced with the worst possible scenarios, desperately trying to deny them while also feeling a sense of resignation. I didn't want to hear any more. Fighting the urge to hang up, I nodded. As expected, it was the news of Liam's death. Liam had taken his own life, I heard repeatedly, but I dropped the phone, forgetting even to cry. I stood there dazed, repeatedly asking, why Liam? Like a broken record. How much time had passed? The pounding on the front door snapped me back to reality. Several police officers had come to check on me, worried about the broken call. I crawled to the front door and opened it, seeing the officers standing there with pained expressions. I finally broke down, crying uncontrollably. A female officer who had come with the others embraced me, and we cried together. The reality of Liam's death hit me like a tidal wave. My beloved son was gone. Overwhelmed by grief, I barely remember the details of the funeral. My anger toward Chloe faded into the background as I focused solely on what needed to be done. There was so much I wanted to say, so much to discuss, but at that moment, words failed me. The police, seeing my condition, decided to postpone their questioning and planned to talk to Chloe in the meantime. However, I doubted she would reveal anything. My intuition told me that Chloe might be the reason Liam was driven to despair. Why hadn't I contacted Liam right away? Why didn't I go to him immediately? My heart was flooded with regret, and for a while, I couldn't even speak. During this time, I received a letter. My hands trembled as I saw the sender's name, Liam. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Liam had passed away 13 days ago. Panicking, I hurried back to my room and opened the envelope. Tears flowed freely as I held the letter from Liam. It must have been something he wrote before his passing, a letter without a suicide note, and with the true cause still shrouded in darkness. I was afraid to read it, yet it might reveal what had been tormenting Liam for years. As I cautiously opened the letter, it was filled with words of gratitude towards me. My body shook uncontrollably, and I couldn't stop sobbing. Why couldn't I have saved him? Why, oh why? The same questions echoed in my mind. As I tried to put the letter back into the envelope with trembling hands, I noticed another folded piece of paper inside. What's this? I wondered. Unfolding the additional paper, I was stunned by the words written on it. Take revenge on my wife for me, followed by an unfamiliar address. Is this where Liam wanted me to go? My tears had stopped, but cold sweat broke out. I couldn't imagine Liam ever using the word revenge. He must have been pushed to the edge. What could I possibly find out there? Since the funeral, I had been cooped up at home, but now I rushed out in haste, so absorbed in my mission that I even forgot to put on makeup. But at that moment, none of that mattered. Determined to honor my dear son's last wish, I rushed to the address specified in Liam's letter. It led me to a rental storage facility not far from my home. Among the rows of storage units, I located the one with the number from the letter. Inserting the small, thin key that had come with the letter, I unlocked the door. The small room, about the size of a half-bedroom, was dimly lit and slightly musty despite it being daytime. I flipped the switch next to the door, and the exposed fluorescent light buzzed to life, casting a harsh glare across the room. "What is this?" I whispered as the space became brighter. The light revealed a desk cluttered with photos haphazardly spread out, surrounded by scattered pieces of notepaper. The floor was littered with notebooks and empty plastic bottles. The scene was chaotic, and I could hardly believe that Liam had used this place. He was always so meticulous about his personal space and belongings. A deep sense of fear gripped me. Trembling, I felt that I was about to uncover something I shouldn't see. The diary before me seemed like a clear warning. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and reluctantly focused on the photos on the desk. Chloe was in them, but she wasn't alone. She was holding hands intimately with an unknown man. The other photos showed them together repeatedly, undeniable proof of infidelity. Though I had suspected from the letter, seeing the evidence confirmed it. Chloe was the source of Liam's stress. While work may have added some pressure, it was Chloe's actions that drove Liam to despair. Trembling, I frantically began to sift through the notes and notebooks. The notebooks were filled with meticulous accounts of Chloe's behavior, exact dates and times of her insults and abusive actions. Her cruelty, including calling Liam useless and hitting him, was documented in chilling detail. My heart ached with the realization of what Liam had endured. Why hadn't I noticed? Why hadn't Liam confided in me? In addition to Liam's handwritten notes, there were also reports that seemed to be from a private investigation into Chloe's infidelity. Several USB drives were tucked in an envelope on the desk. I packed them into my bag and closed the storage unit door behind me. Staying any longer felt unbearable. The place was saturated with Liam's resentment, and even I, his mother, felt overwhelmed by it. "I'm sorry, Liam," I murmured, my heart heavy with hatred for Chloe, who had so drastically changed my son. I resolved to seek justice for Liam. I could have fathomed why he had to endure such suffering or why he hadn't reached out for help. Determined to find answers and avenge his unresolved grievances, I delved into the evidence Liam had left behind. The cruel treatment and infidelity were laid bare in the documents and photos. Each time I reviewed the evidence, I was overwhelmed by waves of panic and nausea. It was a painful and self-destructive task that left me drowning in regret. The realization that even if I fulfilled my revenge, Liam wouldn't return, only deepened my sorrow. Despite this, I couldn't stand idle. I had to decide what to do with the damning evidence. Should I hand it over to the police? No, that seemed too lenient. Liam had ended his life consumed by hatred for Chloe and her affair partner. What could I do to ensure he rested in peace? Just then, the doorbell rang, signaling a visitor. Could it be the police? When I checked the intercom, a familiar face appeared. "Hello, it's Smith here," said the young man, bowing to the camera. "Daniel Smith, Liam's friend from high school." I opened the door, and Smith, dressed in a suit, bowed solemnly. I invited him in, and he requested to pay his respects at Liam's altar. I led him to the prayer room where Smith took out offerings from his bag and sat in front of the altar. After a period of fervent prayer, he turned to face me, his expression serious and resolved. Smith adjusted his glasses and reached into his pocket, pulling out a letter. With a somber expression, he placed the letter on the floor and extended it towards me. It was the same letter I had received from Liam. "This is a letter from Liam," Smith said. "I understand you've received one as well. Liam asked both of us to seek revenge against Chloe." As Liam's mother, I was torn. It was one thing for me to be involved, but dragging Smith, an outsider, into this felt wrong. Although it pained me to deny Liam's wish, I expressed my concerns to Smith. Smith, however, rejected that idea. Even if it's about revenge, I have no intention of doing anything illegal. I'm sure Liam wouldn't have wanted that, he said directly. His words made me realize my own state of mind. Shocked by Liam's loss, I had been swayed by the notion of revenge without a clear plan. Alone, I might have done something drastic. Smith then pulled out a business card case from his pocket and handed me a card. I gave you one at the funeral, but here it is again, he said. The card bore his name and professional details, a tangible reminder of his support and the more lawful path I needed to follow. I couldn't delve into details right away and had to hand over my card somewhat abruptly. Now that I think back, I remember Smith giving me his card at the funeral. He had visited our home several times during high school and even attended the wedding. At the time, I found it odd to receive a business card from him, but my shock had overshadowed any curiosity I had about it. I hadn't paid much attention to his words back then. Smith had indeed mentioned, "If you have any trouble, please contact me." The business card he gave me read, "Smith Law Office." After high school, Smith had pursued a career in law, though I only knew he was working in New York. I had no idea he had become a lawyer. Smith had received Liam's letter and, with the determination to seek justice within the bounds of the law, came to my house. "I've closed my office for a while," he said, smiling for the first time. It was a familiar smile, a gesture of friendship. He wanted to help both Liam and me, refusing to accept any payment for his services. Along with the letter, Liam had sent a substantial retainer fee via registered cash mail. Smith returned it all, saying, "I can't accept this. Please let me do this as a friend. It's the least I can do since I couldn't help him." I hastily stopped him and decided to keep the money for now. Smith, too, was grappling with the inability to save Liam. I needed to consider his feelings as well. I briefed him on the contents of Liam's letter and the evidence I had found in the storage unit. "Let's take a break first," I suggested. "You must be tired from your journey. How about some tea?" Despite the urgency of the situation, having a strong ally like Smith was comforting. I could sense that Smith, too, found reassurance in our shared resolve. As I welcomed him into my home, I knew that we both needed to calm down before moving forward. I handed him the documents, and he let out a deep sigh. "This is tough," he said, a comment that seemed to reflect either his own struggle or perhaps slipped out unintentionally. The man with whom Chloe was having an affair was named Alan Jones. According to Liam's notes, Jones was not only aware of Liam but had also repeatedly threatened and harassed him to leave Chloe. Smith, with his legal expertise, explained that Jones was just as culpable as Chloe. Even if they tried to deny the affair, the photos and evidence Liam left behind should be sufficient for us to pursue justice. "As a lawyer, I can't represent you in court, but I do have the legal knowledge," Smith said. He suggested that while bringing charges against both Chloe and Jones would be a significant step, it would make Smith's role as a lawyer unnecessary, since he had no intention of defending either of them. Instead, our focus would be to organize Liam's evidence, submit it to the police, and press for substantial damages. "We'll present everything Liam left to the police and seek justice for him," Smith said, almost as if trying to reassure himself. He needed to maintain his composure. I explained that I was scheduled to meet with the police soon, and with the evidence Liam had provided, Chloe and Jones would face consequences regardless of their denials. However, I felt a strong need to confront Chloe directly. As a mother, I felt it was my obligation to face her. "I want to speak with Chloe without revealing the existence of Liam's evidence," I told Smith. He agreed readily, understanding that once the evidence was submitted to the police, there might not be another opportunity to speak with Chloe. The timeline was uncertain, and I felt the pressure of time slipping away. I decided to go to Chloe's place immediately, showing up without any prior notice. Her confusion was palpable when she saw me. It was as if she had assumed I wouldn't recover from the shock of the funeral, and her discomfort was evident, given how she had previously revealed her true nature over the phone. It became clear that Chloe was anxious about what I might say. "I know everything from Liam," I started, unable to hold back. "He's not coming back, but you need to apologize. Apologize to Liam." Seeing Chloe living her life as if nothing had happened pushed me past my breaking point. Before I realized it, I found myself speaking out. "What are you talking about? Why should I apologize? What have I done?" Chloe's face froze in shock at my words. Her frantic reaction made me understand that she had been on edge for weeks, worried about when her crimes would come to light. Though she might have deceived the police, she couldn't fool me. I knew everything from Liam, the affair with Owen Jones, and all the terrible things she had done to him. It's all your fault, I said deliberately. You took Liam from us. Chloe's agitation grew. I don't know. I haven't done anything. She covered her ears and shook her head, her mind unraveling under the weight of the confrontation. Her psyche seemed to crack, and she collapsed, crying out, I'm sorry. My heart ached with regret, thinking that if I had noticed sooner or been stronger, perhaps Chloe's behavior towards Liam could have changed. It was infuriating to realize that someone like her had tormented my son. I immediately contacted Smith and recounted what had happened. He chose to explain everything to the police right away, clearly surprised at how swiftly Chloe admitted her guilt. I had expected a more drawn-out confrontation, but the resolution came unexpectedly fast. Later, I learned that Chloe had never anticipated Liam would take his own life. She had hoped that by harassing him, he would initiate the divorce without any proof of her affair. She had planned to claim that Jones was merely a friend. It was a misguided scheme, but she and Jones thought it would work. Liam, still in love with Chloe, never sought legal help or filed a lawsuit despite gathering evidence, hoping for a resolution in a way that never came. Chloe promised to cut ties with Jones, but it was clear her regret came too late. Liam could have sought revenge himself, but he was too distraught to make rational decisions. Unable to sue Chloe, he remained trapped in his suffering, unaware that his kindness was only pushing him further to the edge. Once Smith contacted the police, Chloe and Jones were quickly apprehended. The evidence Liam left behind exposed their crimes, and the case soon became national news. Chloe, now unable to speak coherently, and Jones were both found guilty. They faced confinement in a police hospital. Their actions and names splashed across headlines. Smith's diligent work ensured that damages were claimed and justice was served. Jones lost his job, his sins exposed to his company and friends, leaving him isolated. Even if he tries to reintegrate into society, he will remain burdened by damages and scandal. Chloe's condition was dire. The doctors had little hope for her recovery. She was consumed by guilt, her nights restless and reliant on medication. Though the law had taken its course, Liam wouldn't return. As I saw Smith off, I thanked him deeply. Liam was fortunate to have a friend like you. Thank you so much. Smith, a bit flustered but smiling, responded, I just did what I could as a friend. Please don't be so formal. His support had kept me grounded when I might have lost my composure. I struggled internally to keep my anger in check, deeply appreciative of his efforts. Even though Liam was no longer there to witness the resolution, I continued to bow my head in gratitude. Smith went on to establish a volunteer organization to assist people burdened by various troubles, providing legal support even for those with financial difficulties. His drive to help others, fueled perhaps by his inability to save Liam, led him to continue this work alongside his legal career. A few weeks ago, he visited Liam's tomb and introduced me to his wife and newborn child. Despite his busy schedule, he always makes sure to visit a few times a year, something that would surely please Liam. As for me, I resigned from the part-time job I had been holding since Liam's passing. I felt there was something unique I could contribute, even without the expertise of someone like Smith. I decided to volunteer with a group that supports families who have lost loved ones, joining an organization founded by a local internal medicine doctor. This work, which involves confronting and assisting those in despair, became my new calling. It allowed me to channel my grief into helping others, aiming to prevent tragedies like Liam's. Through this journey, I developed a close relationship with the doctor who founded the organization. Although at times I feel guilty about moving forward, I have come to understand that finding happiness is not a betrayal of my past. It's okay to carry the memories of my husband and Liam with me as I navigate this new chapter. I intend to cherish their memory while embracing the possibility of finding joy in life again.